When I was younger, somewhere between 5 or 8 or so, a distant family member who was supposedly well loved died, and one of his last wishes was for the final celebration of his life to take place at his childhood home. His son DJ decided to respect these wishes and contacted the current owner of the house to ask if a small gathering could be hosted on the premises, and almost entirely outside. As far as DJ and basically everyone else could tell, the homeowner was very kind and understanding and agreed right away, offering to even help out, but being very clear on boundaries and such. Fast forward to the event itself. My family is all arriving, I'd say at around 3 in the afternoon, but I just have this horrible, anxious feeling in the pit of my stomach that I just can't shake. I mentioned it to my mom, saying something silly that I probably heard on TV about my gut feeling. My parents just shrugged it off and told me everything was fine and to come on. I really trusted my parents, so I stepped out of the car, all dressed up in a cute dress and layered in cheap plastic jewelry. Think like Mardi Gras beads type things. I had proudly chosen it all myself to appear formal for this quite serious occasion. My mom, my dad, and I all walked toward the backyard, aiming toward the right-hand side of the house, as the inside was off limits, due to it being private property, when a man suddenly busts out the front door wielding a baseball bat. This was not just a normal baseball bat intended to occupy the children. No, this man bursts out of his front door, screams at everyone, yelling about how horrible we all are and how our family is disgusting, all while gripping a baseball bat full of nails. Immediately I panicked, and my fight or flight, in this case flight, kicked in. I made a beeline to our old blue car that I had only just gotten dragged out of by my dad. I jumped in and slammed the door behind me, panicking with tear-blurred vision and an incredibly upset stomach. When I looked out the window, I saw the man. The crazy man who had made the quick decision to target the elementary-aged little girl as he took a full swing at the car and hit the area above the back tire, creating a loud ringing and making a huge dent. My dad took what felt like 5 hours, but in reality was probably around 10 seconds, to push the man away and jump in, followed by my mom closely behind. We sped away from the house and back home, not mentioning a thing except for how proud of me they were for running, and that they'll listen to me if I ever have that horrible gut feeling that something is wrong again. Though the entire way, both my mom and dad kept shooting quick glances behind the car and whispering something to one another. My family never discussed this event with me around again, but when I asked my mom what happened years later, she explained that the man decided to do a Google search on DJ and found his estranged criminal brother's records on Google. He decided that this was all the evidence he needed to attack us during a wake with a nailed baseball bat. Okay, so before I get into the story, there's a few things I need to explain about my country, South Africa, for you to fully understand it. In South Africa, it's normal to have high brick walls with electric gates, electric fences, and alarms. Crime here is very hectic. It's also pretty normal to have big gardens. My family and I are big animal lovers, so at the time we had 6 dogs. 2 Shar-Peis, 2 German short-haired pointers, and 2 Dachshunds. With that being said, our dogs roam freely in and out of the garden, as it was obviously enclosed. We usually leave the veranda door open during the day for them to do their thing. Another thing about South Africa, it's very normal to have a live-in domestic worker, such as a maid or a gardener. Like, even the average family usually employs them. It's not only something for wealthy people, which seems to be how it is in other countries. For the story, our DW is Ellie, and our gardener is Vince. This happened in 2007 when I was around 9 years old. My older brother, 10, and I had just gotten our first cell phones that day, my dad surprising us after work. You may think it's a bit young for such things, but it was to be used for emergencies or to communicate with our parents. Anyways, it's an important piece of info for the story. We don't usually leave our veranda door open at night due to security reasons, but I remember it being a hot summer night that night, so of course, this night of all nights, the veranda door was wide open, and the dogs were out doing their thing in the garden. My brother and I were in my parents' room setting up our new cell phones, all excited. Ellie's daughter Anne, who's like an older sister to us at 18, was helping my brother and I. My dad was somewhere in the house, and my mom was taking a bath. I specifically remember Anne having a comment about how the dogs would just not shut up, and how annoying it was. And that's when I noticed it too. Sure, they'd bark, but it was usually the dachshunds that yapped, when the bigger dogs just chilled around. Plus, it would only happen for a few minutes at a time, then they'd get over it. Something was different that night though, as even the bigger dogs were barking non-stop. My dad appeared in his room and mentioned to us that he too had noticed the dog's incessant barking, and he was going to check if everything was okay. No alarm bells went off in my head, and I don't believe my dad thought anything was amiss either, because my brother asked to investigate with him, and my dad agreed. I was obviously too engrossed in my new Sony Ericsson. My dad ventured out into our garden with my brother in tow, when he noticed the dogs were all grouped, growling and going nuts at a dark corner behind our ground swimming pool. The best way I can describe it is our garden beyond our pool hits a slight decline, so we have a few steps leading down the hill to the bottom end of our garden. We usually have a lamp that lights that part up, but my dad had noticed how that lamp seemed to mysteriously be off. This confused him, because he was sure it was working the other night. Either way, my dad said he got this gut-wrenching feeling because of this, and because of how out of character the dogs were acting. He called out to them. Usually they'd come running, but tonight they all just seemed to stare at him, then turn around and go back to going crazy at this dark corner down the steps. My dad told my brother to go back inside the house and get a torch, obviously sort of using it as an excuse for my brother to not come with him because of this off feeling. When my brother went back inside, my dad slowly approached the steps. He noticed how the dog seemed to be snapping at whatever it was, hiding just out of view in the pitch darkness. As he got to the steps, he noticed the lamp was smashed. Confused, he inched towards them, and as he put two and two together, it was already too late. My dad, being an ex-vet and avid hunter, felt something cold against his temple and immediately knew it was a gun. Out of the darkness stepped 4 other men in baklavas, all armed. Shocked, he stood frozen on the steps. The man holding the gun to his head was instantly aggressive and asked him where my brother was, that he had seen my dad come out with my brother, but my brother had gone back inside the house. Why was that? My dad said something came over him, and before he knew what he was responding with, said, "He's gone inside to press the panic button." As he said it, he saw how all these men started to panic. They started speaking in an African language called Zulu, assuming my dad couldn't understand. It's not exactly common for white people to speak it. My dad, though, had actually grown up on a farm where he learned it fluidly because of the farm workers. The aggressive guy holding the gun said, "Shit, the cops will be here any minute. Let's just kill this fucker and grab what we can and go." The others, though, seemed apprehensive, and a smaller man with them seemed really on edge. He continued to say how he couldn't go back to jail again, and they needed to just go before the cops show, which would be any minute. He was panicking. My dad took the opportunity to feed on the man's fear. My dad interrupted them, speaking English and pretending not to understand anything they were saying. He told them we usually have armed response vehicles that drove in our area, and since my brother had pushed the panic button so long ago, they'd be here any second. That finally did it. My dad watched as their plan unraveled before them. The smaller, scared guy started freaking out all the other ones, saying they needed to leave right now or else they'd be caught. His skittishness seemed to make the others even more nervous, and lose confidence until they started full-on fighting amongst themselves, their plans slowly turning to shit. The aggressive one pointing the gun to my dad's head slowly lowered it, as they started fighting, losing focus on my dad and shifting his focus onto his crew. My dad used this opportunity to slowly back up the steps, and turned to dart toward the house. As luck would have it, As my dad ran to the veranda door, my oblivious brother was heading out with a torch. My dad scooped him up under his arm, mid-run, and sprinted into the house, not even closing the door behind him. Silly, I know, but I think he just wanted to get my brother inside as quick as possible without even thinking. Ann and I were obviously also oblivious to everything. When my dad rushed through the bedroom door, he slammed it shut and told us to go hide upstairs in the attic. "There's 5 guys with guns outside. They're here to hurt us, so get upstairs now." I remember my body automatically responding and me sprinting to the stairs with Ann close behind. My mom ran out of the bathroom in only a towel not too far behind us. We sat there in the darkness, in silence. I swear you could hear a pin drop. I think we were all just waiting to hear something below us in the rooms. My mom cursed, saying she didn't have her phone on her, and neither did my dad. But it turned out, in my hand was my brand new Sony Ericsson. Never a better emergency to use it than now, right? My mom dialed the police, and I kid you not, they asked where we lived. We explained, and they told us it wasn't in their jurisdiction. Sorry, click, the line goes dead. We're now not only shitting ourselves, but we're flabbergasted too. My mom starts cursing like a sailor again, and that's when my dad realizes, damn, he didn't close the veranda door. What about Ellie and Vince, who were in their rooms blissfully unaware of the danger they were in? He grabbed his firearm in the safe in the attic and told us whatever we heard to not come downstairs, to stay hidden no matter what. Now I'm sobbing, begging my dad not to leave us, but he tells us he has to go get them before something bad happens to them. Now there's even more tears, as reality hits that there's 2 other people still in danger. Anne's understandably in hysterics, because she's also fearing for her mom downstairs. Father disappears, and the air is thick with tension. We can hear the dogs going crazy, indicating those men were still there. My mom then calls another number, the armed security that drives around the area. They said they'd be over in 10 to 15 minutes. They also said to wait and stay hidden until they ring our doorbell at the gate. We all waited in silence, fearing that we'd hear a gunshot or anything indicating these men were in our house. But there was just complete silence. The only sound was the dogs barking outside. After what seemed like hours, most likely a couple of minutes, we heard stomping coming up the stairs, and my heart rate quickened. I remember shutting my eyes and praying it was my dad with Ellie and Vince. Luckily, it was. We all hid for a while, and no one dared to speak. The dogs seemed to have calmed down considerably, but were still barking every now and then. The gate intercom rang out, and my dad told us to wait while he checked if it was the security company, and sure enough, it was. He opened up, and then the nightmare was over. I remember standing up and my knees buckling from the adrenaline my body had endured. The armed security somehow notified the right police, and everyone investigated the garden. They found there were actually 7 pairs of footprints, and these guys bent the spikes on our wall and just climbed over. We got an electric fence installed shortly after. There must have been 2 other guys hiding in the shadows that my dad had never even seen, which is actually creepy in its own right. South Africa's violent crime is quite bad, and it's sickeningly common for torture and rape to happen during home invasions. I was obviously so young at the time, I didn't know the horrors of the world, and was just scared of my family getting hurt. Now that I'm older, just the thought of 4 women being in the house, and my mom being in nothing but a bath towel, gives me chills to this day. The cops said the fact that there were so many guys instead of just 1 to 3 indicates that they possibly had sinister intentions. Thank goodness nothing happened to my family, and I'm forever thankful for my dad's quick thinking regarding the panic button. I'm also glad he understands Zulu and could manipulate the situation to benefit us. Lastly, my family will forever be in debt to our good boys and girls that warned us that night. A terrifying and life-changing outcome would have 100% happened had it not been for our incredible doggos. From that day onwards, my dad always gave them leftover rice or meat with their dinner. This is my first time posting anything like this on here, so forgive me if it isn't the best explanation. This summer, I decided to pick up some graveyard shifts at my current full-time job, simply because it pays more, and I'm a university student drowning in student debt. About 2 weeks ago, on a rare occasion that I get to sleep during the time the sun is down, at 3:30 a.m. to 4 a.m., I was suddenly awoken by a loud noise. Me being half asleep, I honestly didn't know what the sound was exactly, so I just chalked it up to being one of my neighbors dropping something, because I live in an apartment with very thin walls. I just wanted to try and go back to sleep. After about 10 minutes of laying there though with my eyes closed, I heard the sound once again. This time though, I was pretty much awake, so I recognized what the sound was immediately. Someone was knocking on my window. For context, I'm a single female living alone and in a basement suite, so my windows are basically completely level with the sidewalk. Anyways, I'm obviously freaked out. I didn't know what the heck to do. I didn't want to move and make any loud noises so they wouldn't know I was home, and I'm just frozen there laying in this bed. Then I hear the knocking again. I instantly bolt up as my fight or flight kicks in and run for the front door, which has my keys with my pepper spray on it. The keys clink together and make a noticeable noise. The knocking starts to get more intense and loud. This is when I realize the window with the screen by my bed is almost all the way open because my cat likes to sit on the edge. I had forgotten to close and lock it. I started to freak out, already having major anxiety. I started looking around for my phone just in case I needed to call the police. Me being clumsy and shaking from anxiety, I dropped it on the ground, and whoever was at my window proceeded to what sounds like slide either his fingernails or a sharp object down the screen. I realize this person's intentions are either to come in or to scare me, so like a fucking idiot and not thinking, I ran to the window as fast as I could and slammed it shut, locking it while avoiding looking outside at whoever it was. The knocking stopped and I waited about 30 minutes without hearing any more. I laid back down and fell asleep from exhaustion. The next morning, I honestly couldn't believe that even happened to me. I started to think that maybe it was just a bad dream. I go outside and investigate, only to see an empty beer bottle and a ripped blanket. I text my only friend that knows where I live and ask them if they were fucking with me. They say no, which I figured, because they don't drive and live quite far away, and the buses around my house stopped running well before 3 a.m. I called my landlord and told him what happened. He said to just ignore it, as this had happened many times before, which is pretty fucking creepy. Anyway, I obviously recognize now I should have done a lot of things differently and called the police right away. It hasn't happened since then, but nonetheless it was still super terrifying. But unfortunately, I can't afford to move again. I've posted in this subreddit before about an encounter I had as a child, and realized I have more stories from my past that would fit well here. This is a pretty long story, but I hope it can still be engaging. This happened in the late 2000s, when I was around 12 years old. I grew up and still live in a developing nation, so many of the folks who regularly read here might not completely understand or relate to the circumstances behind this incident. I'll try my best, though, to give a necessary background. I was never given permission by my parents to stay out after 7 p.m. for any reason, regardless of the requirement. A movie that ends at 6:30 p.m. and I was dropped home by my friend's parents? No way. Studying at my neighbor's house past 7 p.m.? No go. I was naturally very excited when I got permission to go watch a late-night movie with all my cousins and stay the night at my grandmother's place. We were 6 of us together, 5 males and 1 female cousin. I was the youngest, and the rest were all adults around their mid-20s. The movie finished at 2 a.m., and we were asked to go straight from the movie theater to home, which was nearby. I was more excited to see the city late at night more than watching the new movie that was a big hit. We all went in 3 motorcycles to the theater and decided that once the movie was over, we would go to a cafe that was open 24/7 to have some ice cream. This was the only place that was still open and was relatively far away from my grandparents' house. I can't tell you how excited all of us were, because this was a new place that opened up in my city, and it was extremely popular. My friends always used to brag about how many times they visited the place, and how beautiful the view of the city lake is in the middle of the night. Once the movie was over, we come outside. Except for the crowd from the theater, the roads were completely deserted, not a single soul in sight. Only the streetlights lit up the road filled with potholes, and nothing, not even the medical stores, were open. My female cousin had extremely strict parents, so she declined to come with us. She said she had to be home because her parents were up waiting for her to get back. We of course tried to convince her to come with us. There were 6 of us, after all, but to no end. She was adamant that she had to be home, and we eventually decided it was best to just let her go on her way. We were now 4 of us, on 2 motorcycles, and started riding toward the cafe. I was the pillion with my brother riding, and I noticed that a motorcycle was following us. It was easy to notice, as they were the only other people on the road. I told my brother immediately, and he said they were probably just going to the same place, and to just ignore it. A little further though, another motorcycle asked my cousin to stop, and pretended to ask for directions. They stopped, innocently thinking these guys were lost, and started to give them those directions. While we were starting to talk to those guys asking for them though, 2 more motorcycles suddenly showed up and surrounded us, somehow 8 of them appearing. At this point we realized this was an ambush, but it was already too late. One of the guys pushed my cousin from the motorcycle onto the ground and started hitting him. The rest of us were trying to defend him. Once the fighting stopped, one of the cousins was bleeding all over already. They then asked us to call our female cousin and tell her to come back. They had been following us all the way from the theater. They said, tell her you just need to talk to her. Ask her to come back, because we need to see her. At first, we tried to pretend we had no woman with us. We didn't know what he was talking about. He told us he'd kill all of us if we don't ask her to come meet us. The roads were abandoned, and the occasional car that goes on the road just passed by without slowing down, most likely the people in the car afraid of getting involved. Meanwhile, these guys were clearly having a lot of fun, laughing while they punched and kicked us. With no help in sight, one of my cousins punches one of the guys and yells, "Run!" Instinctively, we all take off in different directions, abandoning our motorcycles right on the street. They started chasing after us, on foot at first. We managed to gain some distance on them though, so they went back and hopped on their motorcycles, chasing us through the streets. I didn't have a mobile phone with me, and I was unfamiliar with the area. I ran randomly, looking for a good hiding place. I jumped a wall into a random person's house while motorcycles drove by on the road looking for us. I didn't know where the rest of my cousins were, especially the one who was beaten badly and bleeding. The house I jumped into was home to a huge dog who started barking at me, waking up the owners. Obviously, they assumed I was there to rob them, but having one look at the scared 12-year-old boy in tears and clearly shaken, they asked me right away what had happened. I explained everything, and I told them I had no idea where my brothers and cousins were. They gave me a phone and I called the police, who said they would dispatch a patrol car, and we could expect it in 2 hours. I had all my brothers' numbers memorized, but I didn't want to call them, as I was afraid they might be hiding, and the ringing cell phone might give them away. I thanked the kind couple who offered to host me until the morning, but I had to get to my grandmother's place and find out if my cousins had made it back okay. I sneaked through all of the streets and finally found my way there. 2 of my cousins had made it back safely, but my brother was still out there. Finally, after a while, he calls us and tells us that he's still hiding and will come back once the sun comes out and there's a general crowd outside. All the way until dawn, the motorcycles kept passing by our house, and we were afraid one of them had followed us home. At dawn, my brother got back, and I was the only one uninjured. One of my cousins got stitches on his face, another one broke his ribs, and my brother had a serious hairline fracture. We all ran through the night, and suddenly all the strict imposition by our parents started to make sense to us. My brother called the cops too, but no one ever showed up. There was no support from anyone. I can't even imagine what would have happened if my female cousin was with us. We never got a call back from the cops to ask if we were fine either. I can't begin to imagine what would have happened if they had caught us. Needless to say, we never went out anywhere at night for a long time after.